welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on the comparative method as outlined by Ratcliffe Brown, a social anthropologist. So Ratcliffe Brown's use of examples from the natural world, including birds, in discussing social structure stemmed from his desire to establish social anthropology as a rigorous generalizing science similar to the natural sciences. So, in biology, organism had discernible structure, that is the bones, the organs that perform specific functions necessary for organism survival. Ratcliffe Brown applied this logic to society. He saw social structure as contributing to the maintenance and stability of the entire social system. So, just as in an organism, the parts are connected to each other, every part is functioning in order for the entire human being. If you look into the human body, every part, the lungs, the heart, functions in relations to each other. So, he is drawing this organic analogy to human society and saying there is a connection or relationship between the parts and the whole, and this network of relationship that kind of regulates the order he termed as structure. So, he was while trying to understand his comparative method, we keep in mind that Ratcliffe Brown was a functionalist and his focus was to understand the social structure. He saw social structure as contributing to the maintenance of the social order. Now, when we try to look at Ratcliffe Brown's understanding and his reference to the natural world or to the birds, the important relevant question is that why birds? So, this accumulation of these parallels leads to a new, more analytical question. At this point, we may feel inclined to ask why these social division should be identified by reference to two species of bird. This signals a move from a merely identifying parallel to trying to understand the underlying reason for the symbolic choice. This is the hallmark of the comparative method in social anthropology, moving from description to explanation of patterns. The co-argument of the essay by Ratcliffe Brown is reiterated. From the particular phenomena, we are led by comparative method to a much more general problem. So, his most important argument was to move from particular to general. That is, you study particular society, find out the ways in which the social order is organized, the way the structure is functioning, and then arrive at certain general universal laws that would help us to understand the parts of society. Now, how can we understand the custom by which social groups or divisions are distinguished? By associating a particular group or division within a particular natural species. So, from the particular to the general is a problem which is identified as the general problem of totemism. This is a crucial pivot showing how the specific examples lead to a major theoretical concept in anthropology. So, we begin by the fact that they are divided into two divisions, the moieties, and each moiety is further divided into clan, and these clans are identified with the particular totem, and these totemic groups are opposed to each other, and there is a kind of argument coming in that through the division, through the interpersonal relations between the totem, the social order is maintained. So, when we kind of deconstruct the problem of totemism, there arrives two sub-problem. Ratcliffe Brown explicitly states he won't offer a complete solution to totemism, but believes it is the resultant of two other problems. This indicates a reductionist analytical approach to a complex phenomenon. The problem of the way in which a particular society, the relation of human beings to natural species, is represented. This focuses on the cognitive and symbolic system within a culture that links human to the natural world. he references his own work on non-totemic Andaman Islander as a contribution to this specific subproblem. He thus analyzed how the Andamanese understood the relationship with nature even without explicit totemic division, which could inform the understanding of societies with totemism. The second problem is how social groups come to be identified by connection with some emblem, symbol, or object having symbolic or emblematic references. This focuses on the sociological function of symbols in creating and maintaining group identity. He gives examples of symbolic group identification, a number of ways in which a particular group identifies with a particular object which is symbolic of the unity of that group. And the most common example is the nation identified by its flag. So, when we know that the flag of the country is being hosted, it is symbolic of the victory of that particular country. Another example is a family identified by its coat of arms. Third, a church congregation identified by its relation to a particular saint. Fourth, a clan identified by its relation to a totemic species. So, basically he is again kind of making a comparison to a society which has a totem or as a symbol, plus non-totemic society with the other objects of identifying group unity. So, these are all examples of a single class of phenomena for which we have to look for a general theory. This signifies the ultimate aim of the comparative method is to develop overarching theories that explain broad categories of social phenomena, not just isolated cases. So, when he comes down from discussing the natural species to the totems, this focus is basically to raise an important question: what is the principle by which such pairs as eagle, hawk and crow, eagle and raven, coyote and wildkite, these are the pairs which are being used in different societies, and these pairs are chosen as representing the moieties of a dual division. This moves beyond why animals are used to why specific pairs are chosen. This isn't idle curiosity. Rattler Brown believed understanding this principle will offer important insight into the way in which the native themselves think about the dual division as a part of their social structure. This implies seeing an emic, that is the insider, is understanding of the symbolic logic. The eagle, hawk and the crow are chosen as totemic representatives because their mythical relationship embodies fundamental contrast or conflict within the society's moral and social order. The legend dramatizes themes of, so when we look into these pairs and the implications that they have, and these are coming in from the legends or stories that have been a part of the society, we understand the dichotomy between, or we understand the opposition between two sets of values. So, the first is reciprocity versus selfishness. So, the obligation of a mother's brother to potential son-in-law versus crow's selfish. So, when we read this book, Methods in Social Anthropology, specifically the chapter on comparative method, there is a lot of reference to the birds and how an analogy can be drawn with the society. So, the way in which crow is selfishly acting is kind of similar to the way in which the mother's brother is obliged to the potential son-in-law. The second set of pair is truth versus deceit, the crow's line and eagle hawk's uncovering of it. The third pair is order versus disorder, the eagle hawk imposing a law and explaining the crow perpetually thieving nature. Fourth, social roles. So, it also kind of helps us when we look into these or read these legends, how there is a division of role, and similarly we find the division of social roles in human society. So, the legend explains and justifies certain behaviors or characteristics associated with the totemic groups. These totemic pairs are not arbitrarily chosen but reflect fundamental opposition or contrast that are significant to the people's understanding of their world and social structure. The natural behavior of the eagle hawk, active hunter, perhaps a competitor for prey, and the crow, who is a scavenger, thief, opportunistic, are symbolically mapped onto the characters in the myth. So, through these pairs of bird, he is actually referring to two sets of values that kind of be the core of conflict or the core of opposition between two groups. One who kind of is selfish versus the other who could be in terms of a reciprocal relation. One who is kind of an opportunist, uses the services available or the society for their own use, versus the other group which could be kind of sacrificing. So, this analogy is basically a way to understand the indirectly in terms of how the social network of relationship are maintained between two opposing groups. Now, this demonstrates the choice of these specific animals for totemic representation is not random. They embody contrasting characteristic, provider hunter versus thief and scavenger, that are meaningful within the aboriginal worldview and potentially reflect social roles or moral categories. And therefore, the reference to the, if we look into the how the human society are organized, or look into the structure of the human society and look into the adventure of hunting, there is a distinction between the men's role and the women's role. The men are kind of in front of the fire, killing, fleeing animals with spears or throwing sticks, whereas women follow the fire, dig out animals like bandicoots that hide underground. Eagle hawk, if we draw a parallel to the eagle hawk, when such a hunt begins, first one and then another, eagle hawk makes its appearance to join, presumably to prey on the animal, flushed out by the fire or killed by humans. This aligns the eagle hawk with the successful active hunter participating in the process of obtaining meat. So, then after looking into why the reference to the animals and pairs in terms of understanding the social structure, he moves to the understanding of kinship system by introducing the two types of relationship, the avoidance and joking relationship. So, in many primitive society, the relationship established between two kin group through marriage is often expressed through two specific customs. The first is the relation of avoidance. The relation of avoidance is a custom where a man is required to avoid close social contact with certain in-laws, most commonly his wife's mother, sometimes her father or others of that generation among her kin. In many other society, or even even in the present society, we look into kinship system in North India. The relation of avoidance is where the daughter-in-law kind of avoids close contact or even appearance with their all the men of her husband's family. And if we kind of look into the custom of weaning, it is also a practice that focuses on relations of avoidance. Now, in contrast to the relation of avoidance, we have the joking relationship. And the joking relationship is a custom where a man is permitted or even required to use insulting or teasing behavior towards some of his wife's kin or his own generation. Now, Ratley Brown was studying say decades back in the primitive society. We also have reference from our own society, again going back to the marriage and kinship in North India. There is the prevalence of joking relation where the again the husband's younger relatives kind of have a open kind of a joking relations with the wife of the brother. So, the elder here it is the younger relative, and the relation of avoidance it is the senior relatives. Now, Ratley Brown has a functional explanation for these customary practices. He has elsewhere suggested that these customs can be understood as being the conventional means by which a relationship of a particular kind is established and maintained. This peculiar kind of relationship is described as a compound of friendship or solidarity with hostility or opposition. So, on one side you have an outsider coming into the family, so there is a lot of opposition, there is a lot of hostility. Now, this is kind of compounded by another set of relation, which is friendship and solidarity. So, instead of asking about historical origin or symbolic meaning, the question becomes, what social purpose do these customs serve, or how do they contribute to the maintenance of social structure? The core insight here is that marriages, while uniting two families, which is a question of solidarity, also creates potential for tension, competition or power imbalance. So, hostility, opposition and solidarity kind of coexist. So, avoidance and joking relationship are presented as mechanism that ritually manage these inherent contradiction, allowing the relationship to persist without open conflict. The fact that these specific customs appear together in many primitive society, despite varying culture, suggests that they might serve as a universal or a widely applicable social function in managing a final relations. Now, when we look into the comparative method and move ahead of trying to understand the functions of method, the fact that these relations, the relation of opposition and relation of solidarity is not only prevalent among the animal worlds, is equally relevant in the human society, and the illustration is through the kinship system of joking and avoidance. Ratley Brown comes to the dual functions of comparative method, and he says that it performs two functions. That number one is formulate problems. Identify the right question is crucial for any science. The second function is provide material for solution. It offers the empirical data and insight needed to begin solving those problems, implying that specific ethnographic examples, when compared, contribute to broader sociological understanding. So, again he revisits, when we start reading the chapter, he begins with Franz Boas' two task of anthropology, that is historical reconstruction and social anthropology. He goes back towards the end of the chapter, he revisits Franz Boas, and he kind of help us to repeat the fact that Franz Boas said that there are two tasks or method of anthropology. The first was historical method, aimed to explain a particular feature in a particular society as a result of a particular sequence of events. The finding yields particular proposition. Example, feature X exists in society A because of historical event Y. And the second function is comparative method. It aims to understand a particular feature of a particular society, not by explaining its history, but by following these steps. And step 1 is seeing it as a particular instance of a general kind or a class of social phenomena. Example, a specific marriage custom is an instance of a final relation management. Number 2, relating it to a certain general or preferably a universal tendency in human society. Example, the tendency for society to manage inherent tensions in law relationship. Such a tendency, if consistently observed, is what is called in certain instances a law. This is the ultimate goal, and the ultimate goal is discovering universal sociological principle. So, he makes a difference between the historical and the comparative method. Anthropology, as the study of primitive society, includes both method, both the historical and the comparative, and he himself has consistently used both in the teaching of ethnology and social anthropology. This confirms his view that both approaches are valid and necessary for a complete understanding. However, there is a crucial distinction. He emphasizes the difference in their output. The historical method, the output is particular proposition, and in comparative method, the output is general proposition leading to laws. This is a powerful argument for comparative method as the path to developing sociological theory and general laws about human society. While historical explanations are valuable for understanding particular society, only systematic comparison across diverse culture can reveal the underlying patterns, tendency and universal principles that govern social life. So, Radcliffe Brown is strongly advocating for scientific law seeking anthropology achieved through the rigorous application of the comparative method. So, history is ethnology and ethnography. This involves authentic accounts of succession of events in specific region over specific period. Its aims is historical, but Radcliffe Brown views it as limited in providing generalization, often resorting to conjectural histories due to lack of authentic historical evidence for primitive society. On the other hand, social anthropology is a generalizing comparative study, a specialized branch of comparative sociology. Its primary goal is to discover universal law and regularities in social life akin to natural sciences. Social anthropology aims to formulate and validate statement about the conditions of existence of social system, thereby developing laws of social statistics and regulates that observable in social change, that is law of social dynamic. Radcliffe Brown strongly disavows attempt to reconstruct the origin of social system, especially for societies lacking historical records. Like we have already mentioned, there is no kind of historical record for the Australian Aborigine. Therefore, he sees such endeavor as speculative and without scientific merit, showing a complete disregard for the nature of historical evidence. And therefore, his emphasis is on the comparative method. For social anthropology, the systematic use of comparative method is paramount. This method involves comparing features of different society to identifying common pattern, variation and underlying principle. The justification for this method is the expectation that it will yield generalizable results about social system. Radcliffe Brown's anthropology is deeply rooted in structural functionalism. He uses organic analogy and views society as integrated, where various social institutions and customs contribute to the maintenance and stability of the whole. So, the institution and customs forms the social structure and the maintenance and stability is the function. So, that is why his approach is also known as functional structuralism. And there is no kind of use of historical speculation. So, in a sense, Radcliffe Brown advocated for a social anthropology that leaves historical speculation to ethnology and instead dedicates itself to a scientific comparative study of social structure. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.